The phone buzzed at 11:47 at night. Mara did not hear it. She was already asleep on the couch, still wearing the clothes she had put on 14 hours ago. Her left hand rested on a dinner plate she had never touched. The food on it had gone cold 2 hours ago, and the gravy had formed a thin, waxy skin across the top. She had meant to eat it. She always meant to eat it, but by the time she had put Claire to bed, read the same picture book 3 times because Claire always asked for 3, fixed the leaking tap in the bathroom with a rubber band and a prayer, and paid 2 bills on her phone while standing in the dark hallway so the screen light would not wake Claire up, the food meant nothing. Sleep meant everything. The apartment was quiet in that specific way small apartments get at midnight. Not peaceful, just still. The kind of still that holds all the noise from the day inside it, compressed. The traffic outside, the neighbors upstairs who dropped something heavy every night between 10 and 11. The hum of the refrigerator that she had been meaning to get looked at for 4 months. It was all there, folded into the silence, waiting. The phone buzzed again. Mara shifted on the couch, pulling her knees up slightly, and the plate tilted. The fork slid an inch. She did not wake up. 3 hours before, she had been trying to reach her sister, Nina. Nina lived 2 states away and worked nights at a hospital, which meant their conversations happened in odd windows. 10-minute calls between shifts. Voice notes left like letters in a mailbox, neither of them checked often enough. Mara had recorded a voice note at 8:51 that evening. She remembered thinking, even as she hit send, that she was rambling. The electricity bill was sitting on the counter, and the number on it was wrong. Not wrong in the way that meant a mistake, but wrong in the way that meant she had to make a decision between that and groceries this week, and she was tired of making that decision, tired of it being a decision at all. She had said all of this into the phone, her voice low so Claire would not hear from the next room, and she had hit send without looking at the screen properly. She had not looked at the name. She had looked at the number. The number began with the same 3 digits as Nina's, and at 8:51 in the evening, after 14 hours on her feet, and a child asking questions with the specific relentless energy that only 4-year-olds possess, 3 matching digits were enough. The contact she had actually sent it to was not saved with a name. It was saved as a number only. 10 digits, no label. She had no memory of saving it. It had been in her phone for almost a year, from the time she had used a shared community phone at the Women's Resource Center downtown to give her number to a caseworker, and somewhere in the process of switching phones 8 months ago, that number had transferred over with everything else, nameless, sitting in her contacts like a door she had never opened. The voice note she sent to that number ran for 2 minutes and 14 seconds. She talked about the electricity bill. She talked about Claire's new tooth coming in, and how the girl had bitten through a crayon. She used a name, not intentionally, not as information, just the way people use names when they are talking to someone they trust, the way you drop a name into a sentence the same way you drop salt into water, without thinking, without knowing what it means on the other side. The name she used was Carver. She did not know, sitting in her small apartment with her cold dinner going cold, that saying that name into a phone at 8:51 on a Tuesday night was the moment everything changed. She found out at 11:54. The buzzing woke her on the 3rd round. She grabbed the phone out of reflex, the way mothers do, always alert to the possibility that something has happened to their child even in deep sleep. Her eyes opened halfway. She looked at the screen expecting Nina's name. The screen showed a number. 10 digits. No label. She stared at it. She did not recognize it. Below the number, a message had come through. Not a call, a text, 1 line. And below the text, a small icon showing that her voice note had been listened to. The message read, "You should not have said that name." Mara sat up. The plate slid off her lap and hit the floor, and the fork bounced twice and spun under the coffee table, and she did not look at any of it. She was looking at the screen. 7 words, lowercase, no punctuation at the end, not threatening exactly, not the kind of words you would take to the police, but something about the way they were arranged, the certainty in them, the directness, the fact that whoever sent them had listened to her entire voice note before responding, made the skin on the back of her neck go tight. She typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared immediately, then they stopped, then they appeared again, then they stopped again. As though whoever was on the other end was deciding something, as though the answer required choosing which version of the truth to offer. The dots disappeared without a reply. Mara sat on the edge of the couch and looked at the number. Her mind was not working in panic yet. It was working in the particular focused way it did when she could sense something wrong before she could name it. The same instinct that had told her, years ago, to leave a situation she had not yet admitted was dangerous. She trusted that instinct the way other people trusted smoke alarms. She opened a browser on her phone and typed the number in. The search returned nothing useful at first. She refined it. She added the area code. She scrolled, and then she stopped scrolling. There was a name connected to that number, buried in a forum post from 3 years ago. The post was about a land development dispute in the northern part of the state. The name in the post, connected to the number the way a shadow is connected to the thing that casts it, was not the name of a land developer. It was the name of a man who had been mentioned in connection with several legal cases that had all been quietly closed before reaching trial. A man whose associates had been investigated more than once by agencies that did not publish their findings. A man who, according to one article that had since been taken down but still existed in a cached version, ran things that were not meant to be run by private individuals. His name was not Carver, but Carver, apparently, worked for him. And Mara had just left a voice note, in her own voice, using Carver's name, on a phone number connected to the kind of man who did not leave loose ends. She sat still for 4 seconds. Then she stood up. She did not think about this in a dramatic way. She did not stand at the window and look out at the dark street below with a meaningful expression. She went straight to Claire's room and she stood in the doorway and watched her daughter sleep for exactly long enough to make a decision. Claire was 4 years old and 7 months. She slept in a very specific way, on her back, one arm thrown up above her head, one knee bent, like a small person who had fallen asleep mid-argument and simply given up. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn jaw, and she made a very faint sound when she breathed that was not quite a snore and not quite a sigh, but something specific to her, a sound Mara could identify in a room of 100 sleeping children. Mara looked at her for 3 seconds. Then she went to the hallway closet and took down the go bag. It had been there for 2 years. A plain black duffel bag, medium size, packed and repacked until she had it exactly right. A change of clothes for both of them. A small amount of cash in an envelope. 2 forms of identification. Claire's medical card, a phone charger, a packet of crackers and a bar of chocolate, a stuffed rabbit named George that Claire could not sleep without, placed on top of everything else for exactly this kind of moment. She lifted the bag and went back to Claire's room and stood there 1 more second. The phone buzzed in her pocket. She did not look at it. She picked Claire up without turning on the light, settled her against her shoulder, and walked to the front door. Claire stirred. She made the specific sound she made when she was 90% asleep and being moved. "Mama," she said, not a question, just an identification. "We're going on an adventure," Mara said, keeping her voice even and light. "Back to sleep." Claire's head dropped back to her shoulder. Mara opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and pulled it shut behind her without locking it. She did not lock it because locking it meant reaching for her keys, and reaching for her keys meant setting Claire down, and setting Claire down meant waking Claire up, and she needed Claire quiet for the next 10 minutes more than she needed a locked door. She went down the stairs. She did not take the elevator. She went out through the side door, not the front. It was cold. She had not taken her coat. She pressed her hand against Claire's back and she walked fast, not running, because running draws attention, and attention was the one thing she could not afford. And she moved down the street with the focus of a woman who had done something like this before and knew the shape of it. The electricity bill was still on the counter. The fork was still under the coffee table. The dinner she had not eaten was still on the floor. And inside her phone, the message she still had not read was waiting. 3 new lines from the same number, sent one after another in the time it had taken her to pack and leave. She would not read them until she was 6 blocks away, standing under a broken street lamp with her daughter asleep on her shoulder, and her heart doing something that was not quite fear, and not quite calm, but something specific to women who have been afraid before and learned to use it. She would read them and go still, and then she would keep walking, because that was what you did. You kept walking. The messages read like this. First one, "We know the number you're calling from." Second one, "We know the building." Third one, "Stay where you are, and this is a conversation. Leave, and it becomes something else." Mara read all 3 standing under the broken street lamp, with Claire's weight warm against her left shoulder. The cold came in through her shirt. A car turned at the far end of the block, its headlights sweeping across the road, and she stepped back instinctively into the shadow of the doorway behind her. The car passed without slowing. She exhaled. She looked at the messages again. She was not a woman who scared easily. She had learned, over the course of her 34 years, that fear was information, not instruction. It told you something was wrong. It did not tell you what to do about it. What you did about it was a separate decision, made with the part of your brain that was still thinking clearly, even while the rest of it was doing whatever fear required it to do. Right now, what the thinking part told her was this: whoever sent these messages had listened to her voice note, identified the significance of one name, made a decision about the level of threat she represented, and sent 3 messages in rapid succession, designed to keep her in place. That was a response chain, a practiced one, the kind of thing you did when you had done it before. She did not reply. She kept walking. The first thing she needed was somewhere to stop that was not her apartment and was not traceable. She had $31 in the envelope in the bag and $48 in her bank account. The $48 in her account she could not touch. The moment she used her card, she might as well send her location directly. The $31 in cash was everything. She knew a motel. It was not the kind of motel that asked questions, which was exactly the kind she needed. It was 16 blocks east, on a street that smelled like diesel, and used to have a laundromat on the corner before it became a parking lot. She had driven past it 100 times. She had never thought she would need it. She walked the 16 blocks without stopping. Claire slept through 11 of them and woke during the 12th, lifting her head off Mara's shoulder and blinking at the dark street with the particular serious expression she wore when she was deciding whether to be upset. "Cold," Claire said. "Almost there," Mara said. "Where's George?" Mara's hand tightened on the bag strap. "In the bag, right here." Claire put her head back down. The crisis passed. They kept walking. The motel was called something with the word rest in it. The sign had 2 letters missing and no one had replaced them. The man behind the desk was watching something on a small television and did not look up when Mara pushed open the door. She asked for a room. She paid cash. She gave a name that was not hers, and he wrote it down without asking for identification because at this motel, at this hour, that was not the arrangement. The room was on the ground floor at the back. It smelled like industrial cleaner and carpet that had been damp once and dried wrong. The radiator in the corner ticked steadily. There was one window, and it faced a wall. Mara set Claire down on the bed closest to the wall. Claire rolled sideways, reaching instinctively. Mara unzipped the bag and pulled out George the rabbit and tucked him under Claire's arm. Claire pulled him against her chest without waking. The crisis passed again. Mara sat on the edge of the other bed. She looked at her phone. There were 2 more messages from the number. The first asked where she was. The second was a single line. "We found your contact. Your sister is not who you think she is." Mara read the second message 3 times. Then she put the phone face down on the mattress and pressed both hands flat against her knees and breathed slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the counselor had taught her years ago when she was in a very different room in a very different kind of trouble and someone had explained to her that the breath was the one thing no one could take away from you. The message was designed to unsettle her. She knew that. It was the kind of message you sent when you wanted someone to do something, to call the number, to respond, to reveal where they were by the nature of their panic. She had seen this kind of pressure before, applied differently, but the shape of it was the same. Push the person, see what they do. What she did was nothing. She turned the phone back over. She looked at the number. She thought about the name she had said into that voice note, Carver, and she tried to trace back in her memory where she had heard it. It took her a few minutes. It came back in pieces. There had been a woman at the resource center, about a year ago, maybe 14 months. She was only there one time. Mara had seen her in the waiting area, sitting with her coat buttoned all the way up even though it was warm inside, holding a paper cup of coffee she never drank. They had not spoken much, but as the woman was leaving, she had said something to Mara, quietly, the way people said things they needed to say to someone before they could say them to no one. She had said, "If anyone asks you about Carver, you don't know that name." Mara had nodded. She had not thought about it again, until now. She lay back on the bed and looked at the ceiling. The radiator ticked. Claire made her small breathing sound from the other bed. Outside, a truck went by slowly, its engine working hard against the cold. She was thinking about the nature of coincidence, About how that woman had given her a warning she did not understand and then disappeared. About how a number from that same resource center visit had stayed in her phone for over a year. About how a moment of carelessness, hitting send without looking at the name, one small slip in a day full of small decisions, had landed that voice note exactly where it should not have gone. She was thinking about how sometimes the world did not give you a gentle warning, sometimes it just handed you consequences and expected you to run. She fell asleep without meaning to, the phone still in her hand. She woke at 3:14 in the morning, not from a sound, not from a dream. She woke the way she had trained herself to wake over the years, from a shift in the air, a change in the quality of the silence. She lay still for one full second, eyes open, listening. 3 knocks on the door. A pause. 2 more. Mara was off the bed before the second set of knocks had fully finished. She moved without sound to Claire's bed and put her hand over Claire's shoulder, not waking her, just locating her, the way you locate a wall in a dark room. Claire breathed on. Mara looked at the door. There was no chain lock. She had checked when they arrived and had noted this as a problem she could not solve. There was a deadbolt, which she had turned. There was a small gap at the bottom of the door where outside light came through. A shadow broke the light at the bottom of the door. Someone was standing close. She had the bag on her shoulder in under 4 seconds. She had Claire up in under 6. The girl made a sound, half waking, and Mara said nothing, just moved. She went to the window. It was old and painted shut in 3 places. She pushed it, and it resisted, and she pushed again, harder, and it gave with a sound that was too loud. The knocking at the door stopped. The handle moved. She had the window up and Claire through it, and she was out into the cold alley behind the motel before the deadbolt made the sound it made, when something other than a key was working it from the outside. She had heard that sound once before. She recognized it. She ran. Not fast. She had Claire on her hip and the bag on her shoulder, and the alley was uneven underfoot, broken asphalt and a metal drain that caught her toe on the second step, and she staggered and caught herself against the wall with her free hand and kept moving. Claire was awake now. She was not crying. She was 4 years old and she had learned, from some quality she had inherited without being taught, to read her mother's urgency and match it in silence. She held on. She put her face against Mara's neck. She held on. The alley opened onto a side street. Mara turned left without thinking. Left felt right, and in a moment with no plan you went on instinct. She covered half a block before she let herself look back. No one came out of the alley. She slowed. Her heart was doing something large and insistent inside her chest, but she ignored it, the way you ignore an alarm you cannot turn off. She pressed herself against a building and looked back. The mouth of the alley was dark and still. She kept walking. She made 3 turns in the next 5 minutes, not because she knew where she was going, but because she needed to make sure no one was behind her. By the 4th block, she was certain she had not been followed out of the motel. What she did not know was how they had found the motel in the first place. She stopped in a recessed doorway and took out her phone. She had used the phone to pay for the room. No, she had paid cash, but she had been carrying the phone, and if the phone could be tracked, not by its GPS, which she had turned off, but by cell tower triangulation, then the motel made sense. They hadn't needed to know the exact room. They had needed to know the general area, and the motel was the only one in the area. A logic that simple required only a contact in the right department, or a system she could not defeat with a turned-off location service. She stared at the phone. She needed it. She had Claire and $31, and the contents of a bag and no car, and without the phone she had no way to call anyone, no way to look anything up, no way to know what was coming. She kept the phone, but she turned it completely off, removing the battery. An old phone, old enough to have a removable back, and put the battery in her coat pocket separately. Offline, dark, as quiet as she could make it. She found a 24-hour diner 4 blocks later. It was the kind of place that existed in the margins of every city, lit too brightly for the hour, 2 people behind the counter, and 1 man asleep in a corner booth who no one was disturbing. Mara took a booth at the back, facing the door, and ordered 2 hot chocolates from a woman who did not ask questions and looked at Claire the way tired people look at children at 3 in the morning. Not unkindly, just with a particular understanding that the situation was what it was. Claire sat across from her with George in her arms and looked at Mara. "Are we still on the adventure?" she asked. Yes, Mara said. Is it a good adventure or a going home soon adventure? Mara looked at her daughter. The girl had her father's jaw and her mother's eyes, and a directness that had been entirely her own from the moment she could form a sentence. It's a staying safe adventure, Mara said. The best kind. Claire seemed to consider this. Does George come on staying safe adventures? George always comes. This satisfied her. She drank her hot chocolate slowly, holding the mug with both hands, the way small children do, treating it like an important object. Mara watched the door. She was thinking about the knocking pattern. 3 beats, a pause, then 2 more. That was not how someone knocked when they were uncertain. That was not how you knocked when you were a stranger who happened to be at the wrong room. That kind of knock belonged to someone with a code, or someone who had been sent to a specific place with specific instructions, or someone who wanted the person inside to know that whoever was out there was not panicking. That kind of calm was its own message. She was also thinking about the voice note, 2 minutes and 14 seconds. She had said the name Carver. She had also, and this was the part she had not let herself think about clearly until now, in a bright diner at 3 in the morning with hot chocolate going warm in front of her, said something else. She had mentioned, in the middle of her rambling complaint about the electricity bill, that she had overheard a conversation at the community center earlier that week. She had not thought anything of it when she said it. It was background, color, the kind of detail you drop into a conversation to explain the shape of your day. But she had heard something, and she had said it out loud, and the name Carver had been said in that overheard conversation. Mara put both hands flat on the table and looked at them. Clean hands. Hands that had cleaned apartments, made meals, braided a child's hair, signed forms, held a crying 4-year-old through a nightmare, fixed a tap with a rubber band. Ordinary hands. The kind of hands that were not supposed to be at the center of anything like this. She thought about the woman from the resource center with her buttoned coat and her untouched coffee. She thought about the warning she had nodded at, and then forgotten. She thought about how the kind of trouble that did not announce itself was the worst kind, because by the time you knew the shape of it, you were already inside it. The woman behind the counter refilled Claire's hot chocolate without being asked. Claire said thank you with the seriousness of a child who has been taught that manners are important. Mara said nothing. She was watching a car that had slowed outside the diner window. It moved on. She waited. It did not come back. She had no plan. She was 4 blocks from a motel room someone had opened with a tool that was not a key. She had $31 and a 4-year-old, and a bag that contained, among other things, a stuffed rabbit and a rubber band left over from the bathroom tap repair she had dropped in by mistake. She was going to need a plan. She was going to need it before sunrise. She wrapped her hands around her own mug and thought about who she knew in this city. Not friends. She did not have the kind of friends who were available at 4 in the morning and whose addresses no one would know. Not family. Nina was 2 states away, and calling Nina would mean turning the phone on, and turning the phone on meant the triangulation problem again. She thought about the community center. She thought about a man who sometimes volunteered there. A quiet man who drove a brown van and fixed the center's boiler every winter without billing them. A man named Owen who she had spoken to exactly 3 times in 12 months, and who had once handed her a card that was not a business card but had a phone number on it, written in pen, and said, "If you ever need someone who asks nothing, call this." She had laughed politely and put the card in her wallet. She opened the bag under the table and found her wallet and looked. The card was still there. Mara looked at it for a long time. The handwriting was careful. The number was there in full. No name on the card, no business. Just a number, and below it, 2 words in the same careful print. No questions. She put the battery back in her phone. She turned it on. She had 45 seconds before the towers picked her up. She had done the math somewhere in the back of her mind, and 45 seconds was the window she allowed herself. She dialed. It rang 4 times. She was ready to hang up. He answered on the 5th ring. His voice was exactly as she remembered it. Low, unhurried. The kind of voice that had made a decision long ago not to be surprised by anything. "It's Mara," she said. "From the center. I'm sorry for the hour." A pause. Not hesitation. More like he was moving from one room to another. "Tell me where you are," he said. She told him the diner. "Don't move," he said. 20 minutes. She pulled the battery out of the phone before he had finished the sentence. Claire looked at her across the table. "Is someone coming?" Someone good, Mara said. She said it with enough conviction to satisfy a 4-year-old. She was less sure herself. But 20 minutes was something. 20 minutes was not nothing. 20 minutes was the difference between standing still in a bright diner and being alone with $31 and a broken plan. She looked at the door. She looked at the clock above the counter. She watched the time move. Owen arrived in 17 minutes. He pulled up in the brown van exactly as she remembered it, scratched along the passenger side like something had swiped it years ago and he had never bothered with the repair. He did not park properly. He stopped at the curb, engine running, and he came through the diner door with the same unhurried walk she had seen him use at the community center. The walk of a man who was not running even when the situation required speed, because running told things to the wrong people. He was somewhere in his 50s, not tall, not short, a face that was easy to forget in a crowd and easy to remember when you needed it. He wore a jacket that had too many pockets for casual reasons, and shoes that had no business being that quiet on a tile floor. He looked at Claire first. He looked at the hot chocolate. He looked at Mara. "How long have you been in here?" he asked. 40 minutes, she said. He sat down across from her, on the same side as Claire, and he kept his voice low and his eyes moving between the door and the window in the unhurried way of someone who had spent years making that motion look like nothing. "Tell me what happened," he said. "Short version." She told him. 2 minutes. She kept it clean. She said the name in the voice note, what she had found when she searched the number, the messages, the motel, the knock. She did not editorialize. She did not apologize for the hour or the situation. She was past the place where she could afford to soften things with social manners. Owen listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for 3 seconds. "The knock," he said. 3, then 2. "Yes." He nodded slowly, as though that confirmed something he had half expected. "You know what it means," Mara said. It was not a question. "It means they sent a retrieval, not a threat," he said. "If they wanted to frighten you, they would have knocked once. Hard, the pattern means someone was told to bring you in calm, which means someone above that someone wants you to arrive functional." He said this with a flatness that she recognized as his form of kindness. He was not dressing it up. "Why?" she said. "Because you heard something, and then you sent it to a number that you should not have had access to. That means, to whoever made the decision, that either you are connected to something you are pretending not to be connected to, or you are an accident that needs to be evaluated in person." "I am an accident," she said. "I know that," he said. "They don't." Claire finished her hot chocolate and set the mug down with care. She looked at Owen with the unfiltered appraisal of a 4-year-old. "Do you fix boilers?" she asked him. He looked at her. Something in his face shifted, not quite a smile but the edge of one. "Sometimes," he said. "Our boiler is broken," she said. "Claire," Mara said quietly. "It is broken," Claire said, equally quiet, entirely factual. Owen looked back at Mara. "We need to move," he said. "Not far, far enough. I have $31. That's not what we're spending," he said. She looked at him. "Owen, who are you exactly?" He met her eyes. He did not look away, and he did not look uncomfortable. "I'm someone who made some decisions a long time ago, and then tried to do something useful afterward, that's all." She held his gaze for another second. She picked up the bag and she nodded. He took them to a house. Not his. She could tell that from the way he moved through it, careful with the space, checking before turning on lights. The house of someone who trusted him but was not present. 2 bedrooms. Small, clean, the kind of house that kept nothing personal on the surfaces. Claire went back to sleep in under 4 minutes on a narrow bed with George tucked in beside her and a blanket that smelled like cedar. Mara sat at a kitchen table with Owen and a pot of coffee, and the particular quality of silence that comes just before dawn. He asked her to go back further. Not the night. Further. He asked about the resource center, about the woman with the buttoned coat, about the conversation she had overheard at the community center earlier that week, the one she had mentioned in the voice note without thinking. She told him. She had been waiting in the hallway outside one of the small meeting rooms. The door was not fully closed. 2 men were inside. She had not seen their faces, only heard their voices through the gap. They were not arguing. They were talking in the steady, practical way of men who were moving pieces from one place to another. She had caught maybe 40 seconds of it before someone came down the hallway, and she had moved away from the door. In those 40 seconds, she had heard Carver's name. She had heard the phrase, "Clear the ledger." She had heard a date, 3 days from now, and she had heard an address. She still remembered the address. She had the kind of memory that caught things without being asked to, a product of years of keeping track of everything alone, bills and appointments and medications and forms, the memory of someone who had learned that nothing would be remembered for her if she did not remember it herself. She gave Owen the address. He wrote it down. He looked at it for a long time. He folded the paper. He put it in one of his many pockets. "You need to understand something," he said. "The person whose number you sent that voice note to, his name is Aldrich. He does not operate the way people expect when they hear the word operate in that context. He is not violent as a first response. He is methodical. He looks at a problem and he solves it in the least complicated way available to him." "Which means I'm a problem," Mara said. "Which means he hasn't decided what kind yet," Owen said. "And that is the only reason you have until sunrise to not be one." She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the sky was doing the thing it did in the last hour before dawn, not getting lighter yet, but getting less dark, a small and specific distinction. "Is Aldrich the one who sent people to the motel?" she asked. "No," Owen said. "That's the part that matters. If Aldrich had sent them, they would not have knocked." She looked at him. "Someone else knows you're loose," he said. "Someone who is not Aldrich. Someone for whom the conversation you overheard is a much larger problem than it is for Aldrich himself." The coffee had gone warm in her hands. She did not drink it. "Carver works for Aldrich," she said slowly. "Yes, but someone is afraid of what I heard, and it's not Aldrich." "No," he said. "No," he said. "Which means whatever you heard in that hallway, whoever was in that room, it was someone inside Aldrich's operation who is running something that Aldrich does not know about. And they used Carver's name. And now you know the address, and the date. 3 days from now." She let this land. She let it sit on the table between them like a thing with weight. "The woman from the resource center," Mara said, "with the buttoned coat. She warned me." Owen was quiet for a moment. "Describe her." Mara did. The coat. The paper cup of coffee. The way she sat very still. She was in her 40s, maybe. Short hair. A scar below her left ear. Small. Old. The kind that had been there so long it had become part of the face. Owen looked at the table. "Her name is Frances," he said. "She was trying to get out." "And did she?" He looked up. "No." The word landed the way a door closes on a cold room. She did not ask anything more about Frances. She had enough shapes in her mind that she could assemble the rest herself, and she did not want to assemble it with words. "What I need to know," Mara said carefully, "is whether Claire is in danger, not me. Claire." "If you are in the system as an accident," Owen said, "then she is not a target. She is a complication that makes you easier to manage, not a liability to remove. That is Aldrich's logic." "And the people who knocked on the motel door?" He took a breath. "They want you gone before you can say anything to anyone. Not because of what you know about Aldrich, because of what you know about them. The distinction is important." "How important?" "The difference between someone who wants you quiet and someone who wants you cooperating," he said. "Aldrich needs to evaluate you. The others need you to disappear." She heard the word disappear, and she felt it the way you feel a cold current in warm water. Sudden, specific, clarifying. "I need to talk to Aldrich," she said. Owen looked at her without expression for long enough that she knew he was deciding whether to argue. "You understand what you're saying," he said. It was not a question. "He's the only one in this situation who might see me as useful rather than dangerous," she said. "The people who knocked on that door have already decided. Aldrich hasn't. That's a window. Small, but there." "He will want the address," Owen said. "I know." "He will want to know everything you overheard." "I know. And after he has it, there is no guarantee of what he does with the rest of the problem." She looked at him steadily. "Owen, I have $31, a 4-year-old, and no coat. My options are what they are." He said nothing for a moment. Then he reached into the jacket with too many pockets, and he took out a phone. Not his personal phone, a spare, the kind you bought at a convenience store and topped up with cash. He set it on the table. "I have a contact," he said, "one step removed from Aldrich, a man named Davies. He functions as a gatekeeper, the kind of role that gives him just enough distance to deny being involved and just enough access to actually matter. If you want me to make contact through Davies, I can. It will take a few hours. A few hours. By which time it will be full morning, harder to move, more people on the streets, but also more visible, which works in your favor if the other side is trying to operate quietly. She nodded. There is one other thing, he said. He reached into the bag he had brought in from the van. She had not asked about it, and he set something on the table. A small envelope. He pushed it toward her without ceremony. She opened it. Inside was a key attached to a plain metal ring, a folded piece of paper with an address, and more cash than she had seen in one place in a long time. She looked at him. I don't accept charity, she said. It's not charity, he said. It's operational. You can't be a functional person in this situation with $31. This gives you options, which means you are a calmer participant, which makes the conversation with Davies more likely to go the way it needs to go. He paused. You can pay it back when this is done. She looked at the key, the folded address, the cash. She did not like it. She accepted it. She folded the envelope and put it in the bag. The address on the paper, Owen said. That is where you go with Claire if I do not contact you by 10 in the morning. Not here. There. It belongs to someone who owes me considerably, and who will not ask questions. And the key? A car, he said. Street parked, half a block south of here. Brown, like the van, before you say anything. I like brown. She almost smiled. It was a near thing. Owen, she said, why are you doing this? He stood up from the table and he took his coffee mug to the sink and he rinsed it with the precise thoroughness of a man who cleaned up after himself everywhere he went, always, on principle. Because Frances asked me to keep an eye on the resource center, he said, and because you are the second person she warned who actually listened. He did not explain that further. He left the kitchen, and she heard him settle into the chair in the front room, not sleeping, just present. The way you were present in a house when the night had more hours in it than the people inside had plans. Mara sat at the kitchen table. The sky outside was still the color of before dawn. She took out the folded paper Owen had used to write the address she had given him, the one from the overheard conversation. She looked at it. 3 days from now. An address. The phrase clear the ledger. She did not know what the ledger was. She did not know whose names were in it or what clearing meant in this context. She could assemble a shape from the edges of what she knew, the way you assembled a puzzle when you had the border pieces and not the middle, and the shape that assembled itself was not a comfortable one. Someone inside Aldrich's operation had been doing something that Aldrich did not sanction. Frances had known. Frances had warned people. Frances was gone. And now there was a date and an address and a woman at a kitchen table at 4:49 in the morning who had heard 40 seconds of a conversation she was never meant to hear and who had made the one small careless mistake of sending her voice into a telephone number she did not know. She sat with that for a while. The thing about carelessness was that it rarely felt careless at the time. It felt like Tuesday at 8:51 in the evening. It felt like a thumb pressed to a send button while a child slept in the next room, and a dinner went cold, and an electricity bill waited on a counter. It felt like nothing. It felt like the 10,000 other small decisions that made up a day. The difference between those 10,000 decisions and the one that changed things was not the size of the decision, it was the size of what was waiting on the other side of it. She thought about the 2 men she had overheard in the hallway. She had only heard their voices, not their faces, but voices carried information that faces sometimes hid. And what she had heard in those 2 voices was a particular kind of comfort, the comfort of people who were accustomed to being the ones who decided things, not nervousness, not the pitch of people taking a risk, the flat, even tone of people who believed the risk belonged entirely to other people. That was what frightened her most, she realized, not the knock at the motel door, not the messages on the phone, not Owen's careful answers or Cole's careful word choices. It was that tone. The ease of men who moved other people out of their way, the way you moved furniture, not with cruelty, specifically, but without the thought that the furniture minded. She thought about what clear the ledger meant. She thought about Frances, who had known something, who had tried to leave, who had warned people in parking lots and waiting rooms with her coat buttoned to the throat and her coffee going cold, and the careful, practiced look of someone who had learned how to say important things in the smallest number of words possible. Frances had been clear-headed. Frances had been careful. Frances had not made it. And Mara had blundered into the same territory with a misdialed voice note and a tired thumb. The unfairness of that was so specific and so complete that she almost laughed. Almost. The almost laugh turned into a long, slow exhale, and she pressed her palms flat on the table and made herself breathe until the tightness in her chest loosened enough to think past it. She was not Frances. Not because she was better or smarter or more careful. She was not Frances because she had gotten here in a different way, and that different way had given her a different kind of leverage. Frances had known too much for too long. Mara had stumbled in with exactly one piece of information, and none of the context, which made her simultaneously dangerous and nearly useless. And that combination, handled correctly, was protection of a kind. This was what she had to offer in the morning. Ignorance shaped like information, just enough and not more. She folded the paper. She put it in the bag. She went and stood in the doorway of the small bedroom and watched Claire breathe for 3 minutes. Steady, easy, completely unaware. George the rabbit clutched to her chest with the seriousness of a child who understood that some things needed to be held onto. The light from the hallway fell across the edge of the bed. Claire's small foot had escaped from under the blanket. It always did. Mara went in and tucked it back, moving in the dark without needing to see, the specific knowledge of a mother who had navigated this room in the dark every night for 4 years. She stood for a moment longer than she needed to. Then she went back to the kitchen. She sat down. She waited for the sky to change color. It did, eventually. They always do. Owen made the call at 6:20 in the morning, standing in the front room with the curtains drawn. Mara heard only his side of it, short, precise, the kind of conversation where both parties had done this kind of thing before, and did not need sentences longer than 10 words. He was on the phone for 4 minutes. He came back to the kitchen and poured himself coffee without speaking, and she waited, because she had learned that Owen said things when he was ready to say them, and not before. Davies will arrange it, he said. Not Aldrich directly. A meeting with someone who speaks for him, a man named Cole. 2 hours. He specified a location. He told her the location. It was a coffee shop, which surprised her. Normal place, she said. That is the point, Owen said. Normal is insulation. She looked at Claire, who had woken up 20 minutes ago and was sitting at the kitchen table eating crackers from the bag, with the focused deliberateness of a child who considered eating a serious activity. Claire can't be there, Mara said. She won't be, Owen said. She'll stay here. I'll stay with her. Mara looked at him. I know, he said, before she could say anything. You don't know me well enough for that, but you have 2 hours to make a decision that determines what the rest of this looks like, and you cannot make it with her on your hip. I'll be in this kitchen. The doors will be locked. She will eat crackers and I will attempt to explain what a boiler is to a 4-year-old. She almost smiled again. Closer this time. She crouched down in front of Claire. I'm going to step out for a little while. Owen is going to stay with you. Claire looked at Owen, then back at Mara. How long is a little while? Not long. Is it still the adventure? Yes. Will you bring me something? Like what? Claire thought about this with great seriousness. Orange juice, she said, the kind with the bits. I'll try, Mara said. She straightened up. She picked up the bag and took out the cash from the envelope and divided it. Enough in her pocket, the rest in the bag, which she left. She took the key. She took the address Owen had given her, folded small. She took the folded paper with the address from the hallway conversation. She looked at Owen. If I'm not back in 3 hours, she said. I know, he said. She left. The brown car was where he said it was. It was older than she expected, and the seat was set for someone with longer legs, but it started on the first try, and the tank was more than half full. She adjusted the mirror. She pulled out of the street slowly. She drove to the coffee shop. It was the kind of place that stayed open through the cold morning hours, serving the people who needed to be somewhere before the world officially started. Early office workers, night shift endings, a table of students who had clearly not slept. The barista was young and moved with the particular focused energy of someone who had not yet had their own coffee. She ordered and sat at a table near the window where she could see the door and also see the street. She wrapped her hands around the cup and waited. Cole arrived at 8:37. She knew him before he said anything because he walked into the coffee shop the way Aldrich's representative would walk into a coffee shop, taking in the room in one pass, making no performance of it, sitting down across from her without a greeting, the way you sat down with someone you had already been introduced to. somewhere, even though they had not. He was younger than she expected, somewhere in his 30s, with the kind of stillness around him that looked like calm, but was actually watchfulness, wearing calm as a coat. He did not order anything. "Mara," he said. "Cole," she said. He looked at her steadily. "You understand what you're here to discuss." "I sent a voice note to a number I didn't know I had," she said. "I mentioned a name and an address and a date, without knowing what any of them meant. I became a problem. I'm here to explain that I am not the kind of problem that requires a solution. I'm the kind that goes away when the situation resolves itself." He said nothing. "And I have information," she said, "which you know, or I wouldn't be here. The question is whether Aldrich sees the exchange as worth his time." Cole picked up her coffee cup, looked at the bottom of it for a moment as though reading something, then set it back down. "Tell me the address. Tell me what Aldrich offers in exchange for it." He leaned back in his chair. Something that was not quite respect moved through his expression, controlled quickly. "You have a 4-year-old in a house with a man you met 3 times, he said. "You have limited hours before the people who knocked on your motel door find you again. Your position is not one from which you negotiate. My position," she said calmly, "is the only position in this room that has something Aldrich needs. Whatever is being planned at that address in 3 days is being planned without his knowledge and against his interests, or we would not be sitting here. I have the address, I have the date, I have the phrase they used, clear the ledger. That means something specific to someone who knows his operation, and I imagine it means something specific to you right now." She watched his face. It changed by almost nothing, but almost nothing when you were looking for it was enough. "What do you want?" he said. "To go home," she said. "My apartment, my daughter, my electricity bill, my ordinary life, which is extremely ordinary, and has nothing in it that is useful to anyone in your world. I want to go back to it without being followed, without someone knocking on a door in a pattern that means something, and without Carver's name being a problem I carry. The people who came to your motel are not Aldrichs," he said. "I know," she said. "I had figured that part, which is why I'm here and not at a police station." He looked at her for a long moment. She held the look without flinching, because flinching was something you did when you were uncertain, and she could not afford uncertainty. Not here, not in front of this kind of person. "The address," he said. She told him, and the date, and the phrase, and the 2 voices she had heard through the gap in the door. Not their faces, she had not seen their faces, but the timbre of the voices, what they had said, the way they had said it, the flat, practical tone of men moving pieces from one place to another. She told him the everything of those 40 seconds as precisely as she could reconstruct it. He listened. He asked her to repeat 2 details. She did. He stood up. "Stay here," he said. He walked outside. She saw him on the pavement through the window, phone to his ear, turned away from the glass. The conversation lasted 6 minutes. She drank her coffee. She watched the door. He came back. He sat down again. "Aldrich accepts," he said. The phrase was so sparse it sounded like a legal term. "The issue of the voice note is closed. You are not connected to this situation. The people who came to your motel will be managed. You do not need to do anything except go where you were and continue your life exactly as it was." "And the number in my phone?" she said. "Forget you have it," he said. "And if someone asks me about any of this?" "No one will ask you," he said, "because no one will know you were ever involved. That is the point." She looked at him. She thought about Francis, about the buttoned coat, about the word managed, which was the kind of word that could mean many things depending on the context. "The people who came to the motel," she said. "Managed how?" He looked at her with an expression that was not unkind, but was absolutely clear. "That is not your part of this," he said. She nodded once. She picked up her coffee. She did not ask again. He stood to go. "Cole," she said. He paused. "There was a woman," she said. "Francis. She used to come to the resource center. She warned people. She is gone. Is she—" "I don't know that name," he said. He said it the way you said something that was technically true while not being entirely the truth. The way you closed a door politely. She let it close. She sat for a few minutes after he left. The coffee shop moved around her. Barista calling out orders. The student table paying and leaving. A man in a heavy coat taking the seat by the door. Normal morning. Normal people. She was the only person in the room whose last 8 hours had the shape they did. She left a tip that was too large for what she had spent. An old habit, the habit of people who knew what it was to need every dollar and who tipped well because of it. She drove back. Owen was in the kitchen when she came through the door. Claire was at the table with a piece of paper and some colored pens that Owen had apparently produced from somewhere, drawing something that looked like a rabbit but might have been a building. "Orange juice," Claire said, looking up. "With the bits." "I forgot," Mara said. So Claire's face registered the appropriate level of disappointment. It lasted for approximately 4 seconds. "It's okay," Claire said graciously. "Owen made me tea." "She asked for tea," Owen said from the counter, specifically. "She doesn't drink tea," Mara said. "She does now," he said, "with 3 sugars. She was very clear about the 3. Mara looked at her daughter, who had apparently decided during her mother's absence to develop a personality that included strong opinions about hot beverages. She set her bag down and sat at the table and looked at the drawing. "What is this?" she asked. "George," Claire said. "But bigger, like a building-sized George." "Right." Owen came and sat across from her. He looked at her face and she looked at his. They had a brief conversation with no words in it, the kind of conversation you could only have with someone who had been in situations adjacent to yours and understood the grammar of them. "Resolved?" he said. "Resolved," she said. He nodded. He stood up and picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. "The car," she said. "Keep it until you get home," he said. "Leave it in your street. Keys in the wheel arch on the driver's side. Someone will collect it." "Owen," she said. He was already at the door. "Thank you," she said. He pulled the jacket on. He considered the words for a moment, the way he considered everything, without rushing, without dismissing. "Go home," he said. "Fix your boiler." He let himself out. The door closed behind him with the quiet click of a well-fitted door in a well-kept house. Mara sat at the table with her daughter, and the drawing of a building-sized George, and the cooling remains of tea with 3 sugars. She was thinking about Cole. The meeting had lasted 22 minutes in total. She had been counting, not deliberately, but her mind had been keeping the time the way it kept everything, cataloging without being asked. 22 minutes to hand over a date and an address, and 40 seconds of overheard conversation. 22 minutes for a man who spoke for someone she had never met to decide that she was worth releasing. She wondered what it would have looked like if he had decided otherwise. She did not spend long on that wondering. She was thinking instead about what Aldrich would do with the information, about the address and the date and the phrase "clear the ledger," which had meant something specific and significant to Cole in the moment she said it. She had seen it in the minimal change of his expression, the fraction of a second where his face did something small and controlled before returning to neutral. He knew the phrase, he understood its weight, and he had taken it back to the phone call outside the coffee shop window, and it had resolved something, or confirmed something, or opened something that needed to be opened. Whatever happened at that address in 2 days was no longer her problem. She had given it to someone who had the means to act on it and the reason to do so. She was a mother who had overheard something in a hallway. She was going home. The logic of it was clean. The feeling of it was not entirely clean. There was Frances in it, the silhouette of a woman who had sat in the same kinds of waiting rooms and warned the same kinds of strangers, and had not gotten out the way Mara was getting out. There was that. She was not going to pretend otherwise. But there was also Claire at the table eating crackers with total commitment, and there was the electricity bill, and there was the refrigerator, and there was a life that had been built piece by careful piece, and that was not going to build itself. She would carry Frances the way you carried something you could not put down entirely, not in the front of your hands, not in a way that stopped you from doing other things, but present, known, a name she would not forget. Outside, the morning had fully arrived, white and cold and unambiguous, the kind of morning that did not have any of the previous night in it, the kind of morning that was simply morning, pressing forward in the direction mornings went, without looking back. She thought about the electricity bill. She thought about the $31, now supplemented but still not comfortable, still the number it was. She thought about the voice note she had sent at 8:51 the previous evening, the one that had started this, and she thought about all the things you never knew you were setting in motion when you pressed send without looking at the name. She thought about Frances. She thought about the way Cole had said he did not know that name, and she thought about the small, specific weight of that untruth, and she held it for a moment, and then she set it down, because some weights were not hers to carry, and this was one of them, and learning that distinction was a kind of survival in itself. "Mama," Claire said. "Yes. Can we go home now?" Mara looked at her daughter. The dark hair, the jaw, the eyes that were entirely her own, steady, direct, the eyes of a person who had not yet learned to doubt what she saw. "Yes," Mara said. She stood up. She picked up the bag. She held out her hand and Claire took it, George tucked under the other arm. They went to the door. Mara looked at the kitchen one more time. The mugs in the drying rack, the neat table, the piece of paper with the building-sized rabbit on it that Claire had left behind. She thought about picking it up. She left it. Some things you left where they happened. She opened the door and they went out into the morning. They drove home in the brown car. Claire sat in the back with George and watched the city pass. She did not ask where they were going, which meant she already knew, or had decided she trusted the direction, which was the same thing at 4 years old. The morning was pale and clear, the kind of morning that had no opinion about what had happened in the night. It was simply morning, doing what mornings did, washing the sky clean and pressing forward. Mara drove at a careful speed. She watched the mirrors, not paranoid, watchful. There was a difference she had come to understand over years of being a person who paid attention to what was behind her. Paranoid was unfocused, scanning everything as a threat. Watchful was calibrated, knowing what a tail looked like, and checking for that specifically. The mirrors showed her nothing unusual. A delivery truck, a woman on a bicycle, a red car that turned off after 4 blocks. She drove. The city shifted around them. The narrow commercial streets became wider residential ones, then the particular stretch she knew, the street with the burned-out pharmacy that had been boarded up for 2 years, and the corner market with the hand-lettered sign in the window, and the lamppost that leaned slightly east from when a car hit it sometime during the winter 3 years ago. She had mapped these things without deciding to, the way you mapped the territory you lived in, landmark by landmark, because knowing your ground was the oldest form of safety. She parked 2 blocks from her building, reflex. She did not park directly in front. She turned the engine off and sat for a moment. The street was ordinary. A man she recognized, the man from the 4th floor who walked his old dog every morning at this exact time, was coming down the pavement with the dog moving slowly ahead of him, doing its investigation of every crack in the concrete, with the seriousness of a very old animal that had narrowed its world to exactly the things it cared about. He did not look at the brown car. He would not have known it was hers. She got out. She got Claire out. She left the key in the wheel arch as Owen had told her, feeling the strange lightness of leaving a key somewhere deliberate, something cared for that was not hers to keep. They walked to the building. She went up the stairs, not the elevator. The stairwell smelled like it always smelled. Someone had left a bicycle in the 2nd floor corridor again. The same bicycle that appeared and disappeared on some rotation she had never figured out. The fluorescent light on the 3rd floor flickered as she walked under it. All of it was exactly as she had left it. She stopped at her door. She had not locked it when she left. She put her hand on the door and pushed it open slowly, and she stood in the doorway and looked. The apartment was exactly as she had left it, the dinner plate on the floor, the fork under the coffee table, the electricity bill on the counter, all of it untouched, unconcerned, waiting with the patient indifference of inanimate things for the life that lived around them to resume. No one had been here. She exhaled. She went in. She picked up the plate first. She always cleaned first, before anything else, the physical order of things being something she could control when nothing else was. She put the plate in the kitchen. She retrieved the fork from under the coffee table. She washed both, the water warm against her cold hands, and dried them and put them away. She made Claire breakfast, eggs, because Claire would eat eggs at any hour. She sat Claire at the table with eggs and more crackers and a cup of water because they were out of orange juice, and Claire ate with the uncomplicated appetite of a child who had been on an adventure and come home and was simply hungry now. Mara made coffee. She stood at the window while the coffee brewed, and she looked at the street below. The man with the old dog was on his return pass now, the dog even slower on the way back, each step a considered decision. The morning was getting fuller, people appearing. Deliveries, the corner market's metal grate going up with the sound it always made, the specific scrape she heard every morning from up here. Her phone was still turned off, battery out. She went and got it from the bag. She sat on the couch and she put the battery back in and turned it on. While it restarted, she looked at the electricity bill on the counter. She had looked at it so many times in the last 2 days that she could have quoted the number from memory. She did not pick it up. The phone came back on. There were 3 messages from Nina, 2 from last night, 1 from this morning. Nina's voice notes, 2.5 minutes and 1 minute respectively. The second one, with the particular urgency of a sister who had not heard back in too long. Mara listened to both. Nina was fine. Nina was asking why she hadn't replied. Nina's third message was a text. Call me when you're up. Just want to know you're okay. She called Nina. Nina picked up on the second ring. I'm here, Mara said. I'm fine. Sorry. Long night. Long night meaning Claire, or long night meaning the world? Both, Mara said, which was as true as she could be without being anything else. Nina made the sound she made when she accepted an answer without fully believing it, but understood she was not going to get the fuller version right now. You sound tired, she said. I am tired. Go sleep. I will. I love you, Nina said. I love you, Mara said. She hung up. She sat with the phone in her hand. In her contacts, the number, 10 digits, no name, was still there. She looked at it. She looked at it for a long time the way you looked at something you needed to decide about, turning it over in your mind without yet turning it in your hands. She pressed and held it. The option came up. She pressed delete. Then she sat there for a moment with that particular specific silence that follows the deletion of something, not the thing itself, but the trace of it. She got up. She got the envelope from her bag, the one Owen had given her, and she counted the cash that remained after the drive, the tip, the coffee. She set the cash in the drawer where she kept important things. She would figure out how to pay it back. She always figured things out. She picked up the electricity bill. She looked at it, the number, the due date, the cold arithmetic of it. She had figured out harder things than this. She folded it and put it in the drawer, too, next to the cash. Later. She would handle it later. Later was possible now in a way that 8 hours ago it had not been, and that was something. That was, in fact, quite a lot. She went to check on Claire, who had finished her eggs and was sitting on her bedroom floor talking to George about something with great seriousness, her voice low and explanatory, the way she talked to him when she was processing something. Mara stood in the doorway and listened. Claire was telling him about the adventure. She was telling him about the diner and the hot chocolate and Owen, who she was describing as the man who knows about boilers but actually also made tea, which Mara thought was a precise character assessment. She was telling George that the adventure was over, and they were home, and that tomorrow she was going to need the yellow crayon, because she had a very important project. Mara went back to the couch. She did not mean to sleep. She was going to sit for a moment and then get up and shower and try to be a functional person in a functional apartment on a functional Thursday. That was the plan. She was asleep in under 3 minutes. She woke at noon. The apartment was quiet. She listened and heard the specific silence that meant Claire was napping. The girl had crashed too, apparently, worn out by crackers and adventure, and very important conversations with a stuffed rabbit. The refrigerator hummed its familiar hum. Outside, the city was doing what it did at noon, full of its own concerns, indifferent and relentless. Mara sat up. She was thinking about Frances. She had been thinking about her in the way you thought about something you could not act on, not obsessively, but with a low, continuous awareness of it, the way you were aware of a sound you could not identify. Frances had tried to get out. Frances had not. The woman with the buttoned coat and the untouched coffee had spent long enough inside something to know its shape well enough to warn strangers, and then she had been caught in that shape, and that was the end of what Mara knew. She did not know if Frances was alive. She did not know what clear the ledger meant in the specific way that it mattered to the specific people who had used the phrase. She did not know what was happening at that address in 2 days, or what Aldrich was doing with the information she had given Cole, or whether the people who had come to the motel had been managed in the way that meant removed from the situation, or managed in some other way that she did not want to assemble a clear image of. She knew that she was on a couch in her apartment. She knew that Claire was sleeping. She knew that the refrigerator needed to be looked at, and the electricity bill was in the drawer, and there were no eggs left, and the crayon situation was going to require attention tomorrow. She held the not knowing of everything else for a minute, The way you held something heavy before you decided where to put it down. Then she put it down. Not because it didn't matter, not because Francis didn't matter, but because there was a specific kind of clarity that came from understanding exactly what you could act on and what you could not, and acting on the first kind with everything you had, and letting the second kind go without guilt, because guilt about things beyond your reach was just another weight you could not afford. She was a woman who paid her electricity bill and raised a child who had strong opinions about tea and knew the names of every crack in a familiar pavement. That was the life. That was the actual life, the one she had built from nothing over a very long time, and it was not small. It was not a consolation. It was exactly the thing she had fought for, in ways that long predated last night, and she was not going to treat it as less than what it was. She got up. She showered. She changed into clothes that had not been slept in. She went to the kitchen and looked at what was there and made a list of what was needed. She put the list on the counter. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. An unknown number, 10 digits, different from the one she had deleted. She went very still. Then she opened the message. One line, no greeting, no signature. It read, "The boiler at the center needs looking at again. Owen says you know someone good." She stood in the kitchen and looked at the message. Outside, the city continued. The refrigerator hummed. A car horn from somewhere below, brief and expressive, the universal language of someone who had just missed a gap in traffic. The message was not from Owen. The number was not Owen's number. She did not know whose number it was. She knew only that someone had sent it, and that it was phrased as something completely ordinary, and that it was therefore almost certainly not ordinary at all. She thought about Cole, who said things that were technically true, and watched her face while he said them. She thought about the meeting in the coffee shop, the calm, the exchange, the sense that she had handed something over and received something back, and that the exchange had been considered fair by the only party with the power to consider it. She thought about the word closed, which Cole had used when describing the issue of the voice note. Closed, a specific word, a word that could mean many things, and that in the context of a man like Aldrich, probably meant exactly what it said. She looked at the message again. She understood, standing in her kitchen with her grocery list on the counter, that she had been seen, not as a threat, not as an accident anymore, as something else, a useful kind of person, the kind you kept a thread attached to not because you owned her but because she had proven a particular quality that was difficult to manufacture and easy to recognize, which was the quality of staying calm under conditions that would have undone most people, and of making good decisions with bad materials. She could reply, she could not reply. She set the phone face down on the counter. She picked up the grocery list. She stood in the kitchen for a moment with the list in one hand and the turned-over phone beside her. She picked the phone up. She did not reply. She did not delete the message. She put the phone back face down and she picked up her coat, the coat she had not taken with her the night before, the coat that had been waiting on its hook by the door through everything, exactly where she had left it. She put it on. She picked up the grocery list. She would figure out the electricity bill when she got back. She would figure out the refrigerator. She would get the yellow crayon. She would get orange juice, the kind with the bits, because she had promised, and she kept her promises. She opened the door. She stood in the hallway for 1 second and looked back at the apartment, the recovered plate, the clean fork, the drawer where the bill waited, the quiet of a 4-year-old asleep, all of it ordinary, all of it hers. She pulled the door shut. She went down the stairs. She stepped out into the afternoon, which was cold and white and indifferent, and she turned left toward the corner market, and she walked. The phone message stayed on the turned-over phone on the counter, unanswered, for now. Because the answer to something like that was not a thing you typed, it was a thing you lived your way toward, slowly, on your own schedule, in your own time, which was the only schedule and the only time that had ever actually belonged to her. She kept walking. She did not look back.